What's up, guys? This is Johnny D Nguyen, and welcome to another episode of the VidQ podcast. Um, Today, my guest is Julie Nguyen. She is a artist manager from Jet Management. So, Julie, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, first and foremost, I wanted to ask, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in East Texas called Longview. For reference, it's a small town about 2 hours away from Dallas, so that was probably the closest major city. And I lived there for the first 17 years of my life, where I was born and raised, and then we moved to California about 11 or so years ago.
So, since you said it was a small town, were there any other Vietnamese Americans living in your city?
There weren't a lot of Asian people in my town, let alone Vietnamese people. Growing up, I felt like the only Vietnamese community around me was my relatives. So my aunts and uncles, they lived there as well as my cousins. And they opened some of the first nail salons in the town. And so when my aunts and uncles opened one, more and more of my family started moving over, including my parents. And they also opened up nail salons as well in the community. So a lot of my Vietnamese culture growing up was only within the privacy of our home and not so much outside of that because my friends and school, everyone else was primarily like white, black, Latino, but not Asian at all. So it was an interesting
What kind of music?
place.
What kind of music were you listening to back then when you were back in high school?
In high school, I listened to just pop. I also loved indie rock as well. And I started listening to a little bit of electronic during high school. And then actually, when I moved to California, I started listening to country music because it was my way of missing Texas, I guess, and digging back into my Southern roots in a way. So I kind of
Got it.
explored a lot of different types of music.
So I'm guess did you go to school out here in California
I went to
to
school
college?
in college. Yeah, so I did senior year of high school here in California. I moved actually to Monterey Park, so it was a very Asian area, which was a drastic difference between, where I came from before. Definitely still not as much Vietnamese people in that area, but more Asian. And then in college, I went to Cal State Long Beach.
Got it. And let's talk about your formal education. So did you choose to was it a music business background, or tell us a little bit more about that?
So growing up, I always thought I was going to be a doctor, very stereotypical Asian family pressures to become a doctor. And a lot of my cousins are doctors as well. So my parents expected me to follow down that path. So I started college as a biology major and I realized quickly it wasn't for me. I wasn't, passionate about it. I wasn't that great at it. So I changed my major a couple of times. Eventually ended up in business marketing and I wanted to find a way to turn my, love for music and going to concerts into a job. So I knew it wasn't going to be a musician because I don't play instruments and that's not my thing, but I wanted to explore the business side of music. So I started finding internships during college. I did about 5 different internships through college in music. So I did music publishing. I interned at Live Nation. I interned at Hasbro Toy Company in their music department. I also interned at a talent booking agency and then artist management.
And so you said you fell in love with music because of you went to concerts often. What was it about that? Let's maybe take us through maybe the first couple of concerts you went to, and what continued to drive you back, keep coming back to them.
Yeah, growing up, well, so in my small town in Longview, we didn't have a lot of shows or anyone come through town. So I didn't really start going to concerts till I moved to California. And some of my first concerts that I loved going to were bands. So a lot of small indie bands, Echo Smith, American Authors, Imagine Dragons, I was a big fan of at the time. I saw them a couple of times. I would always, be the first person in line at like 3 p.m. with my friends, and we'd spend the entire day just waiting in line to get the very front spot at the shows. And it was just always the best experience and the best memories. And that's just where I felt the happiest. So that's why I wanted to pursue that as a career because I knew whatever I wanted to follow down as my career path, I want to make sure it's something I'm happy and love doing.
Okay. So artist management. I mean, that's not oftentimes not a lot of people aspire for. Most people oftentimes when I hear about music industry, they want to be an artist nowadays, or they want to be a creator and so forth. What was it that you felt that being or the career path of being an artist manager was a fit for you?
I loved artist management the most out of all of my internships, I would say, because it allowed me to be my most creative. And the fact that artist managers are just so involved in every single part of an artist's business, and you're constantly in direct communication with them and working with them to build whatever they want to do from the ground up. It was super interesting to me. I was able to use my Photoshop and graphic design skills, but I was also able to tap into just like ideating marketing rollout plans for upcoming singles and shows and find unique and interesting ways to market the artists. And I get to work with creative directors and hire photographers, but we also do other things that I just never, have thought about as being part of what it takes to work with an artist and help them. So I think it comes down to the creativity for sure.
So let's talk about how you landed a job at Jet Management. Seems like Jet Management actually has quite a bit of an expansive roster. So take us through your journey from the start of Jet Management.
Yeah, my last internship in college was at C3 Management, actually. And so that's where I was eventually hired as an assistant and then eventually became a digital marketing manager. So I was running ads on Facebook and Instagram, also social media, marketing plans, and all this other sort of stuff. And so that's where I met my current bosses, John Scholes and Tyler Goldberg. And in 2020, they decided to start Jet Management. So the three of us plus another colleague of ours, so a team of four people, started Jet Management. It was a very small team at first. We brought over our current roster that we had from C3, and then we've grown the team and the roster to about 11 team members now, and over 20 artists across everyone on the team. So it's been awesome.
Take us through just so I'm aware. What would you describe the day in the life of being an artist manager? What do you do every day?
Oh, I mean, it depends on the day that you ask me because it changes every single day. It's literally a just whirlwind of things. So, I mean, one part of the business is the music side. So, you're doing A&R and you're going back and forth with the artist to, fine tune the next single, the next album, and finding, collaborators that they can work with on the songwriting side, the production side, and featured artists on the track list. And so that's one part of the business. And then you have the touring side. So we're working with the agents and promoters to, build out a touring plan that works the best for this artist so that they're hitting the right markets and selling out their shows, coming up with marketing activations and ticket giveaways or whatever is needed to, make sure everything sells out. Another part of the business would be merch coming, working with creative directors and designers to build out designs and then working with manufacturers to produce the designs and drop them and make sure those are also, selling well. And then producing merch for tours also is another part. And I would say, there's the logistical stuff, the day-to-day admin things such as visa applications. We work with a lot of international artists, so we have to either secure brand new visas or get them renewed every couple of years, and that's a long process in itself. And also, hiring creatives, photographers, videographers for music videos and for shows. It's literally, I could go on all day about what we do as managers. What do we not do?
It's what I 100% agree with that. So like speaking to anybody who is ever curious about wanting to pursue this as a career, what are some key skills or at least some mindsets that you would set in order to be a successful artist manager, whether managing an artist on your own or joining a management firm?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think adaptability is a great skill to have, obviously, just because you're setting yourself up to just, be able to dive into anything possible happening that day. There's just so many new challenges and problems that come up, and so being adaptable within how you work and who you're able to work with, and just being a good problem solver, like, are two really great skills to have. I would also say, communication is key. You're in constant communication with not only the artists, but record labels, curators at different DSPs like Spotify and Apple, building relationships with them, also building relationships with different brands and the agents that you work with, the promoters that you work with. Like, it's a big industry, but it's also a small industry. So you're finding yourself crossing paths with people all the time that you might have worked with 5 years ago, or that you work with on a weekly basis across all the different artists that you work with. So being a strong communicator and making sure everyone is in the loop and is aware of the plan is very important to make sure that things don't slip through the cracks.
Now, flipping gears to the an aspiring artist who is looking for an artist manager or a management firm to represent them, um, what are some key things you look for uh, in a presentation or maybe in a pitch from an artist um, that will sway your decision in representing them?
The main obvious one to look at is always going to be, the numbers, the stats, how well are they streaming, how many followers do they have on platforms. But I mean, outside of that stuff, I would say I would look at how strong of a brand identity they have, because
Yeah.
working with an artist who knows what their creative vision is and what they like and what they don't like is very important in order to keep things moving along. And, you can't help someone build their brand and their vision if they don't know what it is themselves. And so I feel like that's a key thing to look at that some people might overlook when, you're signing a new artist, or even if you're a new artist looking to be signed by a management team. So coming to the manager with, this is my proposed plan for the next couple of singles I want to roll out and how I want these to look creatively, and, just having a vision in mind and feeling like you've done enough preparation yourself to get to this current point that you're at, and asking the manager, how can you take me to the next level and the next steps?
I would say oftentimes, and I get this a lot, signing sometimes with a manager, there's a lot of expectations from an artist, and they feel, especially for young emerging artists, they feel a manager is responsible for is a key indicator. I mean, not indicator, a key party to help them succeed, right? Um, my question here is, like, when at what stage is at what stage does an artist is at what stage in their career are they ready to have a firm or bring on a manager? Is it in the early stages, or like more a little bit later?
An interesting question. I feel like, I mean, it depends on the artist and the manager. Some managers are willing to work with an artist who is brand new and help build them from the ground up. But, that's a 2 to 3 year or 5 year investment of time before this manager starts to see the, recoupment come back, I would say. So it depends on how comfortable that management team or manager is with that situation. Also, I mean, taking on artists who have already established some sort of groundwork themselves, I feel like is always a great place to start, because, again, like, that artist has built up their core value and branding themselves. They have a vision in mind, and now the manager's job is to help them grow it. Whereas if you're starting from scratch, you're both kind of building up this vision, but the artist and the manager's visions may not align. And so it's hard to get on the same page when you're waiting on the artist to kind of figure out what they want and what they see for their career. So I feel like it's a partnership between the artist and the manager, but it's reliant on the artist, and how confident they are in their ability to, put out the type of music that they want to put out and stick with that path forward.
Let's talk a little bit about the genre. I believe the the genre of music that you guys focus on at Jet Management. It seems from you maybe you can expand on this. It seems like there's a lot of dance or electronic artists, DJ producers that you guys represent. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, we do primarily have a lot of dance and electronic artists, ranging from different subgenres of electronic, including house and tech house, and melodic music, trap as well. But we also have a couple of singer-songwriters and bands on the roster. But the bread and butter of Jet is definitely dance and electronic. I feel like when we started at C3, we had a roster of 4 to 5 artists, and they were all electronic artists at the time. And since then, it's definitely grown to, exponentially more with the number of artists, but also more genres across both electronic music and other genres outside of that.
I would definitely say electronic music is definitely a global genre. It crosses many borders. I think from at least from what I gathered, there's so many great. It's just expansive, and I find the electronic industry very attractive and interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Working with electronic music is definitely super fun for me. I loved going to festivals during college and like now being behind the scenes and seeing, the fans' reactions to the music and just walking into the festival for the first time and experiencing that is really awesome to see. And just knowing that you're part of helping make that happen is super rewarding.
Then next question I have for you is actually related to the international market. So do you, since you do you get your talent does you guys do represent talent? Wait, I'm sorry. Do you guys represent talent from the international side, or do you work internationally to bring them to other markets?
We work with American and international artists, but a lot of the international artists would be, European. So primarily France is a lot where a couple of our artists are from, and then otherwise, they're from the States or wherever it is. So definitely more American and European focused artists. And for the European artists, I would say we're representing them globally for the most part. We're helping expand them and their audiences within the States and also across the globe as well.
Um, have have you ever had the opportunity or explored the opportunity of the electronic space in Vietnam, or had any inquiries from Vietnam?
I haven't actually, no. I mean, yeah, I listened to Vietnamese music growing up just because my parents were listening to it. I personally did not seek out to listen to Vietnamese music outside of the home, but they only listen to, cải lương and pop
Mhm.
music, but not electronic music. So that's very new for me to explore. And in fact, my parents don't really understand like my job and what kind of music I work in. So I'd be interested to know what type of Vietnamese electronic music there is out there.
Well, I mean, just in the region. So in the territory, they call it the APEC, Asian Pacific. Asian Pacific. I don't know I forgot what the AC stands for, but in the APEC region, which represents like 10 countries: Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, and so forth. Electronic music has grown like massively. It's Insomniac has made an imprint out there in the region, as well as Ultra, and
Mhm.
I would say there's a lot of some markets are more developed than others. I would say Thailand is a very exciting market that is, um, I would say all the big imprints are heading that way. So electronic music and the music festival culture is definitely growing a lot. This year, EDC China is coming back, and
I saw it.
that's gonna be quite. It's been quite a journey for EDC. I think this will be the third edition out there. It because pop music is still the primary driver, and the China
For
market in
sure.
itself is for those who are not in the music industry. If you when you think about China as a market, you don't group it up with the rest of the international space because it's if you can make it in China, you don't really need to leave. You don't really need to leave it there. So, and most of the music is in language to the different languages out there. So, But as I speak to Vietnamese, there's the larger genres are gaining popularity in Vietnam. I'll say house in particular, and future bass. But there
Yeah.
is a very interesting subgenre that I want to share with you that it's unique to just the Vietnam market, and it's called Vina House. So Vina House is a mix between it's a the best way to describe it is it's a the BPM is a little bit more like a heartbeat, and it incorporates the vocals or melody from maybe like a traditional sounding chorus from a song,
Mhm.
and then they'll right when the beat drops, it'll keep at a steady pace to kind of keep with the adrenaline of it. So the Vina part is the Vietnamese side of it, and then the house is the subgenre that is in. It's so
Cool.
that particular genre is what you would hear primarily when you go to they call beer gardens or the local pubs in Vietnam. And there were two notable records that gained international attention through TikTok. Of course, TikTok is really huge in the
Of
region.
course.
One was a song. It's titled, I think, Mok Mười Phút Hơn or something. It's one of the. It's a couple minutes more or something like that, right? But it went through. But the record gained gained popularity because of a dance movement and an anime dance movement that they had as a visualizer, and then it was so easily danceable. That's why I think a lot of people resonated with it. But a international hip hop artist, Tyga, ended up jumping on that remix because
Wow.
he felt yeah because they saw Tyga because he is of Vietnamese heritage as well. He's a quarter Vietnamese.
Oh, I
So
didn't know
I thought
that.
yeah, yeah. So he jumped on the remake and it did exceptionally well. So that was kind of number one. Another song that is not traditional Vina House but got extremely popular is a pop record that had a Vina House remix. Um, it's with a very popular pop artist. Goes by the name of Huang Thuy Len, and her song got popular because of the in the chorus section. It was more she was using percussion words to kind of describe to for the chorus, not to describe anything, but it was just like it's not a language. It was just like for example, the words was like ding ding dang ding, like she just for
Yeah.
some reason that paired up with a very people's um dance covers of it just hit the region as well as even in America hit it really hard. So I think it's got billions of views through all of the TikTok views. So that kind of put that somewhat kind of put Vina House on a global scale. And then when people most foreigners when they come to Vietnam, you go to the clubs, uh, it's blasting everywhere.
Wow. Okay. Well, I definitely will be looking that up after this because I'm super interested to hear what that sounds like.
And as for the rave or music festival culture, there are notable, and I think one of the first to ever do something significant in the country of Vietnam was Alan Walker and
Yeah.
he brought two things to Vietnam that was really cool. One was his he did a show in the heart of Hanoi, and where I think they shut down the streets for him, and he kind of highlighted the city landscape and so forth. And the second, in one of his big music videos, he collaborated with the government to showcase the largest cave that was found in here on right now here on Earth, and he shot one of his music
Wow.
videos in there, and it brought so much, and it was really cleverly done. It was kind of like a Indiana Jones, like finding something that like almost not a treasure, but like um, going into this crazy escapade, and he lands into this landscape, and I think it just brought a lot of people's attention to Vietnam as well as to the caves themselves. So
Yeah.
and then from there, there were several different music festivals that are now. I think one of them is now on their ninth edition, ninth annual, with a break in between with COVID. So the I would say the electronic music is growing, but it still has a lot of work to do in comparison to some of the other markets. Notably, most people in Vietnam, when they go to festivals or when they attend a show from an international DJ or producer, they're not ticketed shows. Let me expand on that.
Mm.
They're primarily brand. It's usually a branded a free show that a
Hmm.
large brand such as a telecom company or a automotive company or a beverage company, primarily beers, they'll do a full marketing campaign with that artist. Chainsmokers was there recently. Alan Armin van Buren, and just any notable international DJs. They will just pay for them to come and do a massive show in the middle of one of the metropolitan cities, and that way they can just market their product. So it's not
Wow.
for any kind of uh, yeah. So it's
Profit.
been kind of a difficult challenge for festival organizers to continue to compete against that because they're
Yeah.
having to have they're trying to change the culture of the festival being its own identity and its own culture and so forth. But when you're competing against a branded free show, it's always an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know all that. That's super interesting.
Yeah, so there's so what's happening right now is there's definitely a lot of local DJs that are taking their talents and also trying to get onto the other music festival circuits so that they could um, gain some notoriety. So it's not always just international DJs coming into Vietnam; it's also the other way around.
Hmm.
So the space is growing at a really rapid pace, and to end on that note, it's probably also the most common remixes as well when it comes to pop artists to work with somebody notable or that can do dance remixes exceptionally well. So it's definitely influenced the region, but it's still maturing as we speak.
Yeah, I feel that is the case for electronic music across multiple international companies. It's definitely a genre that still needs to, a lot of growth within those spaces. But in America, it's, a huge genre and community itself. But it's just outside of that internationally. I feel like there's so many undiscovered lanes and things in electronic music that people just haven't found yet. So it's cool to
And
see that, like in Vietnam, they're providing these free shows to people to kind of make that more visible. And I would love to see that grow more.
now I also want to ask you about when it comes to, I know you mentioned Paris by Night earlier, but in terms of the local music of Vietnamese pop music in from Vietnam, are are you exposed or aware of any that you can name or not really?
When I was little, yes, I don't know any of the current people now, but like I grew up listening to Tristan Trang and Linda Trang Dai and other Vietnamese pop artists just through Paris by Night and Asia and all of the different, concert series that my parents bought every single DVD of when they were released. So
I
I would
see.
just, if I hear those songs now, I can definitely recognize them.
So I primarily so to kind of define it further. So those are more Vietnamese American Vietnamese American names that you mentioned, but not so much from
Mhm.
the Vietnamese artists from the country of Vietnam.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely the more Americanized one. I think that's just because I was born in America, so I gravitated towards the, Vietnamese American pop leaning artists, I would say, as a
Hmm.
kid. I also heard my parents listening to stuff like Cải Lương and things
Hmm.
that are probably more native to Vietnam itself, but I'm just not as familiar with the names or the songs.
Got it. What about I would say what about Vietnamese American artists that do more uh, Western style music, or do music in English? Are you familiar with any Vietnamese American artists in those particular categories?
I'm familiar by name. It's not something I listen to generally, but I believe Keshi is a Vietnamese American artist, right?
Yeah, he's
A
from
lot of,
Texas.
he what?
He's from Texas.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that either. Yeah, my cousins in Texas actually really like him. So that's kind of the reason why I started, kind of exploring a little bit more of his music from time to time. And he's probably one of the few Vietnamese American artists though that I would know of. And I guess Janae Aiko, I believe, is part Vietnamese, possibly. I
Japanese.
might
He's Japanese.
Japanese. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so definitely don't listen to it as much.
But just a quick note on Keshi. So he is arguably probably uh, the largest Vietnamese American artist in the international space at the moment, because from a brand perspective, from a catalog perspective, from an awareness perspective, markets like Korea, Japan, which are like, I mean, they are, those two markets are extremely important to international artists. They're all aware of his music. His name has even spanned China, the Greater China as well. Vietnam, he is well known. Even though he's never stepped foot in the country as the artist Keshi, he stepped foot as the Vietnamese American when he went to go visit his family, but never as Keshi the artist. So it's what he's done is he's definitely somebody to continue to follow, as he's crafted a lane of his own, and just by making a relatable and just amazing music. And I think he's somebody who I oftentimes cover here at VQ Media, and actually is the premise of why I started VQ Media to begin with, which is to cover artists similar to Keshi. And since then, I was able, through my journey over the past 3 years, was able to identify Vietnamese musicians from 18 countries. With my number right now is closer to 900 artists that I've discovered over the course of 3 years.
Wow. Yeah, definitely going to keep him on my list to watch for. But that's awesome to see that he's kind of paving the way for some Vietnamese American artists in that world. And actually, one of our artists collaborated with him on some music, Madion. So they
Oh,
worked together a
awesome!
couple of times. Yeah.
Which artist again? I'm sorry.
Madion?
Nadion. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, what do you? I want to ask you a question about, like, just I I know you don't, at your management company, you guys don't really kind of focus in on cultural identity and so forth. Music is genre based and it's just good music, but to an aspiring uh, DJ producer or an artist that of Vietnamese uh, uh, heritage, what would be some advice that you can give them to to get the attention or to succeed as an artist in the music industry?
So I guess two-part question because there's the Vietnamese aspect. I would
Hmm.
say definitely if you tap into that part of your cultural identity as being, not a spokesperson per se, but like a role model, for other
Yeah.
Vietnamese American kids and stuff, and just seeing someone who looks like them becoming an artist and doing something that's like not super common, especially in our culture, I would say. Like I said, growing up, I was pressured to be a doctor. I was never pressured to be an artist or anything. And that just wasn't anything I saw growing up. So I would definitely lean into that if it's something that, you're comfortable and familiar with, of course, and leaning into that world. But just in general, as an artist who wants to grow in the space, I would just say, work really hard and be super collaborative. Reach out to
Love it.
artists that you want to work with and artists who are on the same level as you and just work together because you never know what kind of ideas are going to come out of these different sessions and what kind of music you could create, what kind of skills you can build. And building a community around you is super crucial to like just keeping you motivated to keep going,
Super
because
crucial.
working in music is interesting to say the least, especially from the artist perspective, because you're going to get some no's along the way, and you're just going to have to keep pushing yourself to keep going, because it's such a saturated space as an artist, and you just have to find a way to how to be different from everyone else.
I can't agree more. I think interesting is a very nice way of putting it. I would like to add
Yeah.
to that is you got to be resilient and believe
Yeah,
and believe in yourself because it's
totally.
especially in in this current economy in the current music industry. There's so many the ability to get your music out and with the technology that's available is much easier than it was back in the early '90s. Just the
Yeah.
the back in the day, you had to print physical copies of CDs and get that into the stores. Now you literally have DistroKid. You can put your music out there and
At the tip of your
get some people
fingers.
who can vibe with your music. Hmm.
Yeah, you
So
don't even need a
it's a
label
whole
or
different
a
ballgame.
distributor anymore. You can just upload it yourself on any independent platform and just go.
I also want to just touch on that. I'm a firm believer also in uh, you. Some people think signing to a label is very necessary for the growth, but I'm of the ideology of no labels necessary for um, uh, maybe even for the duration of your career. I don't think it's there is definitely advantages and disadvantages of being part of the label, but I think owning everything of your catalog is and knowing how to deal with every aspect of your brand and identity is extremely important. So, what's your opinion and thoughts on when it comes to an artist saying, "I need a label in order to succeed"?
I don't think you need a label. I think having a label has its pros and cons for sure. Having a label it means having a bigger team to support you in all of your efforts. So if it's just the artist themselves or an artist plus a manager, you're having to check off all the different boxes, and you might miss a couple things here and there, but when you have the support of a label, they're helping you figure out what things you still need to do before a song comes out, and post release as well. So it's nice having that support system and another, backboard to bounce ideas off of and help you execute on stuff that the artist wants to achieve, whether that's a release party or, a listening session with fans or whatever it is. Like, I love that aspect of working with a label, but I also agree with you. I don't think it's necessary to succeed with a label. You're fully capable of doing this on your own as an independent artist. There's so many tools on the internet where you can upload a song and figure out how to run an ad yourself, or, just all the
Yes.
little dotting your I's and, crossing your T's. It's just like, these tools are available to everyone. So it's just a matter of how hard do you want to work to make that happen, and how important is it to you that you keep 100% of your master in exchange for having to do all of the work, that goes alongside that. So it's, the harder you work, the better the results are going to be in the end. And I feel like you can achieve that independently, and you can also achieve that with the label.
I think it's necessary for an artist, especially in their journey, to learn every aspect of the career. I mean, of the music industry, and it comes. I think I also wanted the myth that organic listeners. You put your music out, and you're going to have a ton of organic listeners that come find you. Everything is very algorithm driven. Everything
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
there's just so much, and the reality of that is there's just so much music out there, guys, that it's almost impossible for you to just not for you to gain market awareness without a support of like of a team that knows how to navigate through it. You gotta get your you gotta there's community building you gotta do. There's just so much work. So I think it's very important that you learn the business instead of just, hey, I created the music and you put no effort, zero effort into the music promotion, which oftentimes
Yeah. No,
but
there's
that,
so much work to do.
but I want to speak to that because it's so true. It's like a lot of times because I mentioned earlier that in the course of 3 years, I've discovered and spoken to almost close to 800 different artists of the from with a Vietnamese background, and some of the most common thing what has happened since then is of the 900, the failure rate of them is extremely high. They I don't talk about them often again because they've done one, two, or three songs and they're done. They're done because
Yeah.
they weren't, they thought putting it out on DistroKid was just enough, and 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 they got 100 streams, and it affected them. So it just what I found more was it was more of a hobby than it was a true passion. So that's why
Yeah,
I was very intentional in saying the word resilient, because
for sure.
the ones that the ones that do make it are resilient.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky to work with artists who are very hardworking people in general. And so that's just them themselves working on their own and building their careers. Like it's just so you can see the difference in those types of artists versus the ones who are just, kind of half, putting in efforts and not really marketing the music and not posting on social media and not, running ads and like doing whatever they need to do to make their music, more widespread and build an audience with that.
Now, kind of going back to what you said earlier about representation from the artist side, I want to say that also applies to the industry professional side. There's not, you know, I'm slowly starting to find more Vietnamese Americans or Vietnamese in the working behind the scenes in various different sectors. But even down to artist managers, is actually that number is a lot smaller. So I would say finding and having this conversation with you is you're definitely one of the rare. There's probably just a handful of artist managers of that are Vietnamese. So that's why it
Yeah.
was important for me to have your insight and conversation. So, is it in your in your environment? Um, is there any other Vietnamese that you've come across? Are usually the the one and only Vietnamese in your circle?
I would not, I can't claim I'm the one and only, but I'm definitely one of the few that I know of. Actually, thinking about my, music industry community right now, like I know of other Asian managers, other Asian music industry professionals, and I'm trying to even pinpoint further to remember if any of them are specifically Vietnamese, just a very small handful of them. So yeah, it's definitely a very small represented circle of this industry, and I'd love to expand on that and see that grow, even just like yeah, it'd be great to have that community and build that network of people with me. And the connections that I have made who are Asian and Vietnamese in this industry, like I feel like we have a strong sense of camaraderie with each other because you just kind of identify culturally with each other and you know what the struggle is when you're the one person in the room who looks like you.
Well, I can say with confidence, you are the one that is in this particular category, in this music genre. There's another one in Germany. It's kind of manager slash producer, but
Mhm.
in terms of working at a management firm and focusing on dance music specifically, you're the lone wolf in at least here with
Hopefully
that
not
I've
for
spoken
long.
to. But there are in pop music, R&B and pop. I've in a previous episode I interviewed a young manager who represents Eric Bellinger in the R&B
Mhm.
category, and he also represent their firm also represent athletes as well. Um, and then another music
Cool.
manager, she represents a Vietnamese American artist named Thuy, who is gaining a
I know
tremendous
them.
amount of
I know
yeah.
of them.
Yeah, so there that particular group is quite interesting because they to your point of not necessarily carrying the culture on their back, but it's like I'm I'm here for more doing the music that I love, but the representation side of showing that you can be that I can show my Vietnamese side by for her incorporating her name, not changing her name to a Western name. She
Hmm.
says keeping her name as Thuy was one way of representing the culture. Another one would be just even talking openly about being identified as a Vietnamese American artist, that was another way for her to tap into that. And then just earlier this year, she did a remix with a very popular Vietnam-based pop star, and and to her one of her title singles from her album, and that particular remix did exceptionally well. It helped the Vietnamese pop artist gain some market awareness in the Western market, and it did wonders for her in the Vietnam for Twee in the Vietnam market. So
Yeah, I
that
bet.
was that was a really cool project, and to top it all off, her best friend slash her manager is Vietnamese American. So it was they always will incorporate or represent to the fullest, but at the first and foremost is making sure they create amazing music, and then if the community supports that, then they're for it.
That's awesome. I love that. I love to see just, also just women in music killing it
And
too.
women, actually, that's a huge thing for them too. They participate
Yeah.
in. I think last year they participated in Billboard and women in the Women in Music platform that happened here in Los Angeles. So they're
Hmm.
very about women power and so forth.
For sure. Let's go.
And then to kind of lead to my next question is, what to you, what does being Vietnamese mean to you?
Ooh, being Vietnamese just means I am proud to be Vietnamese. I speak Vietnamese. I identify as Vietnamese. I eat Vietnamese food. Have not been to Vietnam, but that is on the list, and it will happen soon, I'm sure. But yeah, I think being Vietnamese is just embracing that part of your identity and not being ashamed of it and being vocal and proud about it.
Awesome. Well, I definitely, when you cross into that journey into heading over there for to visit, it's I would say it's a life changing experience, especially as American born Vietnamese, because um, never in your life will you be in a country where everyone is the same and speaks the language, and it's quite a surreal experience, and I've been back actually over 12 times, and
Wow.
every trip means something differently to me. Every trip I grow a deeper understanding, and yeah, it's quite a personal journey.
Yeah, I would love to experience that one day. Just like you said, being surrounded by people who speak and talk the same like you is just crazy in itself because I only have that at home.
So I guess just quick, a couple of last questions is, in 5 years, do where do we see Julie in 5 years? Do we see her um, expand more in the artist management world, or do you have any other goals that you want to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to continue on this path of working closely with artists and finding like interesting ways for them to connect with their audiences and build new fan bases. There's so many like unique opportunities popping up on different platforms on social media and streaming and with AI now that that's just so accessible. So I'm sure there's going to be a ton of new spaces to tap into and find places for our artists to build their, careers that way. And that's definitely one goal of mine. And another one of my goals is just to get more involved in, the music behind the scenes with, organizations about women in music and Asians in music. And if there is such a community as Vietnamese music industry professionals to help grow that as well, like that, that'd be amazing.
It's funny you said that. I'm initiating that. There
I will
is
join.
there's quite a bit that I'll definitely expand on that with you.
Yeah, I would
And
love to.
lastly, just so I know what, because I would say Vietnamese food has definitely gained, especially when it comes to Asian cuisine, has gained so much more visibility and awareness. It's no longer kind of like foreign or rare. Um,
Mhm.
Being Vietnamese, right? So, what is your favorite Vietnamese food and why?
Ooh, I
Tough one.
love. I know there's so many things. I mean, immediately my mind goes to just my aunt's home cooking. Anything she makes is my favorite. But if I have to pick, I would say bún riêu, crab noodle soup,
Okay.
is my favorite. It's super comforting for me. You know, it's a warm noodle soup. It's savory and also tangy, and the crab meat that is in it, like the ground meatball, I guess, is just it's delicious.
And being from Texas, anything you miss from the food scene from Texas?
Not Vietnamese food in Texas.
I think it's improved a lot. I'm pretty sure, but
Yeah, but I mean, when you live so close to like Orange County and Garden Grove and Bolsa, like that doesn't compare. So the only food scene I miss in Texas is my aunt's house because she makes the best Vietnamese food.
now speaking of Orange County, how often do you come down to Little Saigon? And is it the only reason you come down here is to for the foodie scene?
Well, actually, my parents and my sister live in Tustin, and
Okay,
every 1 to 2 weeks I come down, pick up my parents. We go to Little Saigon and have lunch and take them to the grocery store. So I'm there a lot.
got it. Awesome. Well, I mean, that's pretty much wraps up our conversation. I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We've touched on a lot of cool things. And I guess just trying to think of any lasting thoughts or comments you want to share to our listeners here at VQ.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been great talking to you as well and learning more about Vietnamese music and culture. I'm definitely going to be looking up all the artists and things that you talked about. But yeah, I thank you for listening. Thank you for having me.
I have so Well, be ready for it because I have so much music to share with you. my I feel like my life work um, uh, has been finding all these different artists from all parts of the world, and I've learned so much, and I share it through whether it's my podcast. I have a playlist that I popularize in terms of regions. I organize them by regions and genres, and I have my own version of New Music Friday, which I called Fresh Friday with the incorporating pho,
But
and that concept
clever.
actually took off. It was a silly gimmick, but it ended up that's how people find or they tune into my playlist to find what's happening in all things related to the Vietnamese music space. So I just kept running with it.
That's cool. Yeah, I would love to, check out all of these things. So if you can send me over an email, that'd be great.
I sure will. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we will definitely be seeing you at one of these music